Jim wanted to be the security guy. He claimed he was a security guy.
Welcome to another political version of Security Guy Ready with Chuck. Chuck, Registered Voter Herald. And Paul?
Tally-ho, and registered voter. And
Excellent.
Citizen, Bristol.
Oh, well, it is interesting you did mention citizen, because I've always questioned that you were an actual citizen.
I am an actual citizen.
What type of citizen would that be?
Well, I'm actually two citizens, because I'm a citizen of the UK, I'm British, and the US.
Why would anybody want to be a citizen of Britain? They're all leaving.
Well,
Of
that's
course, I could have been a
That's
citizen
true.
of Ireland, too, but I missed out because my grandmother had registered. I would have been a citizen of both. But, well, it's funny you should mention citizenship, because we're going to talk about the great American right, which is to vote. And we just so happen to have somebody in here we want you to vote for. Isn't that right? What a coincidence that is.
The next,
we believe, the next sheriff of LA County. Chief Jim McDonnell of Long Beach PD, the current chief of Long Beach PD. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. I know you're very, very busy. We thought this was important to have you on because being both law enforcement officers, ourselves, former, we kind of, have the inside dope on what's going on in law enforcement, and it's changed.
Yeah.
We're not as senior as you are, but, even since you started.
are you saying he's old?
I didn't say old, I said senior.
Senior.
It's experience, yeah, senior experience. So, we're just going to kind of have a casual conversation today and let you get your message out. And, we're curious about a couple of things. We'll ask you some questions. We'll go from there. Sound good?
Perfect.
So tell everybody about your background. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Grew up in Boston. My parents came to this country from Ireland a year before I was born, settled in Boston. My dad was a laborer. We grew up down the street from Fenway Park and, came out to join the LAPD back in 1981 when the economy was bad back in Boston. Kind of chasing the dream, I guess, if you will. Never expected to get on because I didn't know anybody west of New York. But and back there, the mindset was, and the political reality was, that you weren't able to get on the police department unless you had some connections. And
even back
absolutely
in the 80s, interesting.
Oh yeah. And so I looked at LA. LA had opportunity. They were hiring, and they had a great reputation. And I figured if I didn't at least try, I'd be disappointed for the rest of my life for what could have been. So I gave it my best shot, came out, and it worked out. And spent 29 years with the LAPD, and in 2010 applied for and got the job of chief of police in the city of Long Beach.
Now, why did you get into law enforcement in the first place? That's one of those academy questions, but...
Yeah. To be honest, I thought I was going to be an architect. In high school, I had taken college prep as well as drafting with an eye towards going to college for architecture. And I remember my senior year in high school sitting at a drafting table thinking to myself, could I do this 8 hours a day, 5 days a week for the rest of my life? And as a 17-year-old kid, I was probably too hyper to think that I ever could. And I thought to myself, with my limited experience and worldview, what can I do where every day will be a new challenge? I get to meet new people all the time. Each day is a fresh start. And at the end of the day, I feel like I help somebody. And the only thing I could think of was policing, that if you did it right, you were able to achieve all of those goals.
Yeah, it's true. I remember... going through the academy with people that had college degrees. A friend of mine in Culver City had a degree in marine biology. There's a lot of people in law enforcement that have degrees in other things, and people don't realize.
Yeah.
They're kind of diverse people. And it really makes for better law enforcement.
Absolutely.
It really does.
Yep.
And in the old days, you didn't have to have a degree, but nowadays they're really more encouraged.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So the big question I'm going to have right now, which, let's start with some basics. Tell us the difference between a sheriff and a chief of police. A lot of people think these are interchangeable. They're not interchangeable at all.
Not interchangeable, but very similar in many ways. The chief executive officer, if you will, for the organization, whether it's a police agency or a sheriff's department. And what a sheriff's department is a different definition in different parts of the country. Back east, where I'm from in the Boston area, the sheriff takes care primarily of serving summonses, takes care of the jails and the courts. Out in the west and in the south, it's different, where you have the law enforcement function as well, and in some places the sole law enforcement agent for the county. So looking at where we are here in Los Angeles County, there's kind of a hybrid model where the sheriff has the responsibility for the courts, for transportation, for the rails, the buses as well, and the law enforcement function for 42 cities within the county, which has 88 cities. Which are contract cities, as well as the unincorporated areas for direct law enforcement services. And then they provide additional services such as homicide investigation, the deployment of the bomb squad, and other investigations as needed for jurisdictions throughout the county.
Are they the largest sheriff's department in the world?
They
LA
are.
County? They are,
Yes,
right?
they are, yes.
And so I remember from the academy, remember when they used to say where the word sheriff came from? And I hate to say it, it's another British term.
It is.
A shire reef,
Yeah.
all right? Are they the chief law enforcement officer if everything went to hell? Would everything come under the sheriffs, who would then help run the local police departments and things like that? There's a chief law enforcement officer in the county, so to speak.
Yeah. If there's a need for mutual aid, it's coordinated through the sheriff's department.
Yeah.
If we need outside, federal help or help from the state, all of that mutual aid is coordinated through the county.
So it's a perfect segue to say the word outside. Why is an outsider, meaning a chief of police, coming into the sheriff's department a better candidate than somebody inside the sheriff's department themselves?
Well, I think at this point in time, when you look at what's happened in the sheriff's department in the last several years, where they've had repeated issues, all sorts of issues, and I think probably your listeners are familiar with many of them, but brutality in the jails, corruption issues, which is not a word I use lightly in the context of what we're talking about, pay-to-play, favoritism, nepotism, those kind of things. When you look at that, and all of that has been going on for some period of time, and I had the privilege to sit on the Citizens Commission on Jail Violence, and having worked alongside the sheriffs and looked at that organization, admired that organization for so many years, and in the last several years seen it in decline. It was painful to watch as somebody who relied on them as partners. And so I think to be able to look for what's the remedy for the organization, I think it's a fresh perspective. It's somebody coming in from the outside who is familiar with the organization but doesn't have lifelong or career-long allegiances with anybody in the organization, somebody who can come in and see things and see opportunities that those who grew up in the organization and were socialized through that organization wouldn't see. So I think you've got the vast majority of the organization, the men and women who work both on the professional staff and the sworn side, great people trying to do the right thing, working very hard. The leadership that they've worked under in the last number of years has let them down. And in an effort to be able to move forward, I think that an outside perspective is very healthy at this point.
I think this is it's simple and it makes sense, and it's kind of brilliant in a way. I mean, Einstein said something like, "Problems can't be solved by the same people that created them."
Right.
It's basic common sense and math. And so, if you're the insider and you kind of cause the problem, how can you possibly fix it? I kind of agree with you on that. I think it just takes somebody to come in and say, "I'm not attached. Here's the right thing to do." Maybe not popular, but let's
Right.
just get it done. So
I'd like to step back a little bit from a management perspective. Obviously, you spent a long time with LAPD.
Right.
You've been at Long Beach, 4
4
5
years. Yeah, 4 years. Yeah.
I mean, you didn't just move from LAPD to Long Beach. You did a lot of management jobs with LAPD.
Sure.
Can you just expand on that a little bit? Talk about what you did.
Well, yeah, I spent 29 years with the LAPD and began in the academy, worked the field in a variety of different experiences, and moved my way up the rank structure over those 3 decades. And probably, looking back on it, the 3 decades of the most significant change in policing in the last probably 100 years or more. And really, we've come a long way in policing, in both being more open with the community, being more approachable by the community, increasing the use of technology to make ourselves more efficient, and I think overall in professionalizing what we do and taking it serious that there's an ability to be able to take it to the next level. Each time we get to a level, we're looking to make it even better, and I think that's what makes it a profession, that we're never satisfied with where we are.
what were some of the specialized units you might have worked in at LAPD? Or managed, I guess.
Yeah, gang units back in the 80s when the crack cocaine epidemic was really fueling the rate of violence in the city, the homicide rate, homicide in 77th Division, Organized Crime Intelligence Division, a vice tour, inspection and control, the eyes and ears of the chief's office, if you will, to go around the department and find things that aren't working the way they should and to remedy them, or to find things that are working well and to be able to then celebrate them. And so I look at that as an opportunity, that lessons learned there, to be able to take into the sheriff's department as well, because that's an invaluable tool that until very recently was not implemented there, and one that I wouldn't want to do without.
I know that you've made a great impact on Long Beach since you've been there. Can you talk a little bit about what what you saw when you got there, and
Right.
what changes you sort of made?
Yeah, I think some lessons learned from having been in the LAPD under a consent decree, and some of the transformational change that we were able to accomplish with the men and women of the LAPD and the community of Los Angeles. To be able to take some of those lessons learned and bring them to Long Beach, I think was very valuable to me. I was the outsider coming in Long Beach, and they certainly weren't looking for an outsider at that time for the most part. But it worked out because it was that fresh perspective. It was lessons learned elsewhere that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel then in Long Beach. We have a great organization there, and we've been able to, in spite of the budget issues and a decrease in the deployment of sworn personnel by 22% and civilian support staff by 25%, we're still able to drive crime down to the lowest levels, violent crime, lowest levels on record last year. Property crime down significantly, and our numbers this year compared to last year are down unbelievably, really. Yeah.
And for people that don't know, Long Beach had some serious crime back in the day.
Yeah.
It wasn't
very
all
much so.
Queen Mary and nice restaurants and things like that. They had their areas and problems. So that's significant to make that impact like that.
I think Long Beach is looked upon as kind of the little brother to Los Angeles, being right next door to it. If it was a city anywhere else that was separated by real estate, it would be viewed as a major city in the United States. It's I think the 35th largest city in America.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in LA County, is that like they're third? Glendale's second and they're third or something?
No, vice versa. Yeah, it's the second largest.
Oh, second. Interesting.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
So, how many officers? I guess officers have you commanded, like in the LAPD?
In the LAPD, Bill Bratton was the chief. I was the number two, and we had a workforce of almost 10,000 sworn and 3,500 additional there. And then Long Beach is a lot smaller footprint and an organization that's extremely lean. So we have right now we're down to 803 budgeted sworn and about 340 or so professional staff.
Really busy.
So very
area.
very lean. Yeah.
No, I think that's significant for our listeners. I'm probably going to be a little wrong on this, but not too wrong. LAPD under Bratton, and
Right.
And you worked as a team on this.
Right.
LAPD has or had about 9,000 sworn, always kind of had about 9,000 sworn, right? More or less?
Well, years back it was down, in my time on the job, they were down as low as 6,900.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was very lean.
But they make many more arrests than a place like New York. Their
Sure.
arrest ratio is higher, which really goes to the efficiency and how they do things. It's
Yeah.
interesting. Not that we have more crime per se, it's just that we're just better at doing it with less people.
Well, we definitely do it more efficiently. When you look
Right.
at the officer to population ratios of New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, it's about 4 to 4.5 officers per thousand population. DC 7.5, and you look at LAPD at 2.5.
Really?
Long Beach at 1.7. The West Coast policing is very lean, and that while that's efficient from a city standpoint as far as funding it. It comes with a cost in that you don't have as many officers out there to be able to respond to calls for service. It potentially can drive up your response time,
Right.
but also you don't have the ability, because you're racing from call to call, to be able to spend as much time on each call with the victims of a crime or witnesses to a crime as you would like to.
So what's your take on the Sheriff's Department applying those ratios? Do they have the similar ratio problems for law enforcement?
Yeah, the Sheriff's Office is also a very lean organization, much in line with the rest of West Coast law enforcement.
So here's what people don't know. The Sheriff's Department is contracted by unincorporated cities. So Lawndale has a contract. They need a police department, and Lawndale hires them to do the police work. Is that
Yeah, not
simple version?
unincorporated. They're incorporated
Oh, I'm sorry,
cities.
incorporated, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
All of the unincorporated areas throughout the county are policed by the sheriffs, but in addition, cities that are contract cities contract to the Sheriff's Department for policing services, and there's 42 of those cities that do that. There's 45 independent cities throughout the county as well.
So here's a boring question, but somebody might want to know it. What is something like the city of Lawndale pay, for an officer per year? Do we know?
Each one is contracted and
Negotiated separately, so to
yeah,
speak.
yeah. I mean, there's a fee schedule that the Sheriff's Department has, and there are experts in that who focus exactly on that every day.
I would have thought that there's a lot of work between LAPD and the Sheriff's Department and Long Beach. I mean, the fact that you've done those different departments, how do you think that's going to help when you become sheriff?
Yeah, well, I look at the sheriff as, if you will, to use a sports analogy, kind of the quarterback for public safety in the county. And in looking at that, you're a member of the team. You need to rely heavily on every member of the team. But I look at historically, the Sheriff's Department had its own organization, organizational pride. We don't need help. We don't need to work with others. LAPD was the same way. Long Beach PD was the same way. And many of the other cities were also the same way. We all tried to do it on our own. And I think the reality is after 9/11, we realized that none of us can do it alone. And the more we work together, the more effective we all are. So in looking at that, I believe that coming in as the sheriff, I have the ability to provide direction and leadership to the Sheriff's Department, but having spent 29 years with the LAPD, the relationships, the network there to be able to bring that organization to work closely together with us. Long Beach PD, likewise, for chief there for the last 4 years. And then last year I was president of the LA County Police Chiefs Association, which are the 45 independent cities that have their own police departments. And I have their full endorsement and support for my candidacy. So, going in as sheriff, I don't need to have a reception to meet everybody. We've worked together. We're professional colleagues, and I have all of their endorsement and support moving forward. So we have the team already in place from a countywide standpoint, and now it's putting that together and sharing strategies and working together cross-border so that we're more effective and more efficient both.
Well, that is a great strategy, because if you are working side by side with other chiefs that either came from LAPD or came in the ranks with you and stuff, you really have. It's like it's like running a business. I mean, you're
right.
using other resources to help you coordinate things. What do you think is the biggest challenge? Is a nice politically correct word, isn't it? What's the biggest challenge that the Sheriff's Department has right now? Is it public image? Is it efficiency, or what's your take on it?
Crime, or
Yeah, well, I think it's a combination of so many different factors. It's a very complex organization with very varied responsibilities. I think job number one is restoring public trust in the organization, to be able to, if you will, put the shine back on the badge and put pride back within the organization for what that badge symbolizes. When you look, if we can restore that and get everybody once again excited about the organization and that restore that pride, then we have a situation where deputies help other deputies do the job the way it was intended to be done, as professional as possible, both on and off duty, because nobody wants to tarnish that image. You know,
that's a good model, because you and Bratton did that. You had to bring Bratton in as an outsider. Tell us how you accomplished that within LAPD, because my understanding from my buddies at LAPD is Bratton was a good guy. They liked him. They respected him, right?
Right.
How did he and you accomplish that within LAPD to earn that respect from an outsider?
Well, Bill Bratton and I have known each other for many years from back in Boston. We competed for chief. He got the job and made me his number two. I had put together a plan that I thought, when I competed for the job, of what was wrong with the department and what I believed needed to be done to help remedy that. We used that plan to help get things off the ground and move forward. In looking at what Bill Bratton brought to the table as an outsider, I think my own feeling and the feeling of many within the organization was we didn't need an outsider. We knew what was wrong and we knew what needed to be done to fix it. But the reality was, when he came in and we sat down at the conference table in his office and we started talking about issues, he raised questions that we didn't even see.
Interesting. Like what?
Why do you do this way? Why is this unit assigned to do this way? Issues, whether tactical, strategic, deployment, across the board, budgetary. And I use the analogy, it's like walking into a room, and if you work in that room every day, you don't even see a painting on the wall that somebody walks in the room for the first time, sees it as struck by it and comments on it, and you look at it, and then all of a sudden you see it, but you didn't before.
That's interesting. Very interesting.
So I'm going to ask the sort of one of the big questions that are going on the concealed weapons law.
Got a minute left, so let's not make sure he gets it. Maybe it'll be a
I
short
reckon we
answer.
get this at a quick
Okay, sure.
I mean, what's your view on the new concealed weapons, if it actually comes through in California?
Yeah, I think that we're in a good place where the proponents of the Second Amendment certainly want more clarity than we've had in the past, and the population on the other side that wants more control over weapons wants clarification. We're in a position now where the Ninth Circuit heard the case where Sheriff Bill Gore of San Diego was sued, and they found that he was issuing permits based on just cause, which is in excess of what the Second Amendment talks about. So they heard that, and they found that he was not issuing, if you will, by that standard, enough CCW permits. That has now been appealed, and it'll be heard by the en banc full Ninth Circuit Court. And then the potential, I guess, is that if they find the way the 3-judge panel did, that potentially it could be appealed to the Supreme Court, at which time we'll get some closure on it. So in looking at it in the meantime, I think it's prudent to wait and see what happens in the courts to get that clear definition of where we're going from here. And I think most sheriffs are doing that.
Yeah, it's a way to make sense.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of almost a done deal, but apparently not.
Yeah, it's got a while yet.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a break. We'll be back in a minute on Security Guy Radio. That's securityguyradio.com. Hi, everyone. This is Chuck Harold, your host of Security Guy Radio. Tune in on Monday, June 2nd at 7 p.m. for my really cool interview with Mike Howard, Chief Security Officer from Microsoft. From his beginnings as a police officer with Oakland PD to his 22 years with the CIA, I think you're going to find Mike's interview fascinating. So join us on Monday, June 2nd at 7 p.m. exclusively on Security Guy Radio, and visit us on the web at securityguyradio.com. Welcome back to Security Guy Radio. That's securityguyradio.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. We're back with our guest, our very special guest, Chief Jim McDonnell of Long Beach PD, running for LA County Sheriff. We think the next LA County Sheriff.
We know.
Dare I say.
We
That's
know
correct.
next.
Be so bold. Mr. Bristow, the show is yours. Take it away.
Well, one of the things that I know you're really interested in and have worked hard on is the whole issue of human trafficking. And I don't think people realise what a huge problem it is,
right,
even in Southern California. Can you sort of get into that a
Sure,
little bit?
sure. Thank you for the opportunity. Human trafficking, I think, is broken down best into for labor purposes, using somebody to do manual labor, and then for sex trafficking. And there are a number of entities that look into this at the federal, state, and local level. What we've looked at, and recently it's really become much more pronounced, and what we find is the more we look, the more we find, sadly. And what we find are young girls being trafficked by young men, mainly gang members. And the reason for that, and we've seen a proliferation of it, is because young men now realize that there's low risk and it's tremendously lucrative to traffic in young girls for purposes of sex. Oftentimes we'll see, girls as young as 10 or 12 years old. The average age for girls getting into this is 12 years old in California.
Oh, my God.
Very, very sad. Many of these girls are runaways or so-called throwaways that nobody's looking for them, nobody cared about them. Many of them have been abused from their earliest days of life. Many run away from foster care. But that's not an exclusive group either. There's also many kids that are at home on the internet and meet someone on the internet and are lured away, and then next thing you know, they're drugged, they're raped, and they're put into this life of misery. And so we've looked at this differently now in recent years in Long Beach, and certainly, like I mentioned, the more we look, the more we find. But it's something that I think most Americans think occurs somewhere far away, Southeast Asia, maybe Mexico, maybe Central or South America. This is happening right here in our own backyards, and it's very, very sad. And you wonder why. How did this happen? And really what it is I think the emphasis on reducing gang violence. The gangs have now tried to be more innovative and find ways to operate under the radar where they can make a lot of money, but don't get as much attention. And usually vice enforcement is done, and the 3 C's of vice enforcement are conspicuous, complained of, or commercial. And when you look at this is certainly commercial, but it's not conspicuous because it's done on the internet and with cell phones for the most part. So when some pedophile wants to have an encounter with an underage girl, for the most part, and it's not exclusively girls either, they find a location, they get a contact on the internet, they make cell phone calls, and then they're directed into a vacant house, a motel room, or any number of other types of locations. And these girls are generally required to raise $600 a day on average, and if they don't, oftentimes beaten, tortured, or put out.
A 12-year-old needs to raise $600 a day.
Right.
Unbelievable.
Right. So, you can do the math and figure out how many times a day they have these sexual encounters, and it's just very, very sad. But you look at that and you think, why would they do this? And just the money involved in this. If you have 5 girls working in this fashion, and you're running 7 days a week, all day and all night pretty much, you're looking at a profit of $600,000 to $800,000 a year.
Jeez.
And where previously many of them were selling dope, and you sell it once and it's gone. And this is
right.
The product, if you will. The poor young girls are being sold over and over again.
It's a recurring revenue stream.
Yeah, and it is slavery.
It's slavery. You know, I'm fairly up on this stuff, and I was under the impression you just said that this is, they're coming in on containers at the port of L.A. from China, and then they're domestically transferred. But you're talking about homegrown stuff.
These are our own kids for the most part.
Any particular areas that are, kind of a hotbed of this stuff or centralized?
I think anywhere that honestly looks for it will likely be able to find it to some degree. And I think different cities, there'll be varying degrees, but I think what you see is it's focused where the gangs are generally, most prevalent, but it's certainly not exclusive to there. There's nice, I'd say, more affluent neighborhoods where they're certainly not exempt from it either.
Are you going to go so far as to say it's mostly organized crime? I mean, if it's a gang and there's 25 different gangs in L.A., they might not be related to each other, so you wouldn't call that organized per se, but is it going that way, that it's that much of a business model?
Oh, it certainly is a business. I don't know that I'd call it necessarily organized crime in that there's one umbrella organization running anything. It's primarily young gang members that have gotten involved in this, and they have their number of girls, whatever that is, generally 3 to 5, that they're trying to be pimps for, and all of the money comes into the pimp. They don't share anything with the girl. And basically they are being held as slaves within a confined location and kept from public view and just used.
Any big recovery cases where you've located some big houses and got kids back and stuff?
Oh, yeah. We rescue kids all the time. And like I mentioned, the more focus we have on rescuing young girls, rather than looking at them as suspects in a prostitution case, we look at them as victims in a sex trafficking case. It changes the dynamic. The officers are out there, and they treat the case differently, and their focus is to be able to try and get the girls involved in a program that'll get them out of this lifestyle, that'll get them into recovery and separate them from the pimp.
So I'm scratching my head, because if I was the arresting officer and I came across this and I'm going to interview the parents and bring the kid back, I'm thinking, maybe I'm not bringing the kid back to mom and dad, because, I don't know, are they negligent parents? Do you ever prosecute parents for letting their kids run around? Or they're not kidnappings all the time, like you say. Maybe they're runaways and such, but what are the parents' reactions to these things?
Well, I mean, it's the gamut. You've got kids who are in homes where everybody thought everything was going well, and these kids end up on the internet and end up running away or getting taken away and then held against their will. And then there's other kids that are from foster care or already taken away from the parents and in a situation where they've never had a good day, and from our perspective, and you just look in a very sad life, and they're looking for something different, something better, and many times these pimps sweet talk them and tell them this is what big girls do, and get their nails done, their hair done, and treat them in a way that, as sad as it is, that is maybe better than the way they felt they had been treated up to that point.
But in almost all cases, they're not still living in the home. It's really, they're gone. They're out of the home and kind of out on their own most of the time.
Many of them. However, I wouldn't say that doesn't happen, because we're seeing that the more we look, we have kids who run away from neighborhoods, affluent neighborhoods, a family that looks like it's functional completely, and the child gets on the internet and finds a person who reaches out to them and promises them something or along those lines, and they leave with them.
Wow.
From a law enforcement perspective, has this been is law enforcement only recently focused on this, or is it just been a growing sort of thing over the years?
I think it's been an evolution. I mean, certainly it's not something new to anybody, but I think the amount of it that we're seeing is striking I'd say in the last 5 years, but more prevalent even in the last 3 years, where we're seeing, and really what's driving it is the gangs getting involved in it, where that wasn't so much the case in previous years at all. And as I say, the more we focus on that as an issue and realize what a serious issue it is, so we dedicate more resources to it, the more of it we're finding.
Do you find a corresponding drop in other crimes that were traditionally gang-driven because it's going up on the child trafficking side?
Yeah. And I look at our gang shootings in Long Beach as just an example, and Long Beach is no different than any other city. But we're happy on one hand that our gang shootings are down 66% this year versus last year.
66?
Right.
Wow.
Violent crime was at a 40-plus year low at the end of last year, and some of that is because of more strategic policing, more effective use of technology, better relationships with the community, demographic issues, but it also, I think, is the gangs are becoming more sophisticated, and as they do, they're getting into crimes that bring less attention to them, but are as or more lucrative for their purposes.
That's amazing.
From a sheriff's perspective, I'm assuming they've already started. They're already working on
Sure.
this. Is there anything that you're thinking about sort of improving in this sort of area, or
Maybe coordination with all the other agencies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, the sheriffs are doing a good job. They're working hard at this. Certainly have an awareness and are plugged in. We work with them as well in adjoining cities. But I think in any jurisdiction, we need to be focused on this as something that is becoming more prevalent and something that is horrific. But I think there's an opportunity for coordination across jurisdictional boundaries, whether they're cities within the county or from county to county, because these girls are operated on tracks, as they call them, and they move the girls around from major event to major event. There was just a big press release after the Super Bowl here not too long ago where they talked about making a large number of arrests on people who were looking for underage girls.
Oh, they travel into the venue of the city to shoot the show.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
So take advantage of wherever the incident is, and so I think it's incumbent on the city that's hosting a major event to also put in place a plan to be able to deal with these type of issues.
So when you're the sheriff, what's your thumbnail sketch plan? Just more coordination with all the agencies, task force stuff or something?
Yeah, everybody's exactly task forces, because everybody's strapped for personnel, and
Right.
And wherever you add a person to a task force, you're taking them away from somewhere else, or if you make a specialized unit, they're coming out of patrol or somewhere else. So to be able to share resources, to have regional approach to dealing with issues, specific issues like this, that way everybody gets an opportunity to be able to train their own personnel for what to look for, how to prosecute.
Right.
We work very closely with our federal partners because we get much greater prosecution opportunities where they end up doing long terms, and 85% of their terms are mandated. So it is a team effort, and you can't do it as an individual jurisdiction as well as it can be done as a regional approach.
Yeah, if you took one copper from 47 LA County police departments, or 45?
45, yeah, 45 independent cities.
You'd have a small police department.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
From an internal perspective of how the sheriff's department works, I've always wondered about the efficiency and stuff of the deputies performing duty in the jails
Right.
before they come out. You got any views on that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I sat on for a year on the Citizens Commission on Jail Violence, and we looked at that issue very much, not only in the efficiency of it, but in the culture that it shapes for the rest of your time. In the past, when you wanted to join a police department, you looked at the different departments, and many people would deselect themselves out of the sheriff's department because they didn't want to spend the first, recently 6 to 7 years in the jail environment.
I did it.
Yeah. So a lot of potentially good candidates choose to go elsewhere
and
because
you have
of that
to
alone.
do that, right? You
Right.
haven't got any choice.
Right.
Yeah.
And oftentimes what we saw in the worst cases were that people would spend that period of time in the jails, and then they would get into the field where they wanted to be in the first place. And then when they promoted, they had to go back in the jails again to do generally a year or so of dead time that didn't count much for their career. And then when they went back in the field, oftentimes we saw that people who had committed misconduct were moved from the field into the jail environment. So here's your most highest liability portion potentially of the department, and we're treating it as a dumping ground. What message is that to the good people working in the custody environment about how the organization sees it?
It cuts both ways, because the sheriffs I've worked with, they're absolutely the most officer safety
Right.
conscious law enforcement officers around, because they deal with it every day before they get out of the field.
Right.
But makes them a little grouchy too.
Yeah,
Working from
it
the
shapes-
jail to the street.
It shapes your
Exactly.
perspective on humanity.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll be back in a minute on Security Guy Radio with Chief, soon-to-be Sheriff Jim McDonnell of Long Beach PD. Welcome back to Security Guy Radio with Chuck Harold and Paul Bristow. Actually, what I should have said? Welcome to an incarcerating version.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I said intoxicating last week. Would have been better to say incarcerating.
I
But
thought it was prophylactic last week or whatever that was.
oh no, that's right. Intoxicating was the week before. It's don't even start. Don't even start. All right, back with Chief. Oh, by the way, follow us on YouTube's, LinkedIn, Oh, forget it. I lost my rhythm. You interrupt me, I lose my whole flow thing.
Well, that's the whole point.
I know. Welcome back to Security Guy Radio, securityguy.radio.com, with our very special guest, Chief, soon-to-be Sheriff Jim McDonnell of Long Beach PD. All right, so before the break, we're talking about the sheriffs, how much time they spend in the jail. And that's one reason I looked at the sheriffs. I thought it was a great organization back in the 80s. I wanted to work there and said, you're going to be in the jail 5 years. And I went, I can't handle the smell, dude. That's,
Yeah.
So how can we take a sheriff and turn him into a community policing model? Because that's not the model they have. It's jail, incarceration, and then subcontract to cities. Let's talk about community policing. I think, Paul, you really have a better angle on this because you're a Bobby walking the beat. It works.
I'm so for community policing. Yeah. I think it's one of the things that I was disappointed with. I would say about the U.S. policing model is that it's not really based around that that community aspect.
And Bobby still do not have guns in England, right?
Most of them do now. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because most of the Bobby's coppers doing patrol don't, but most of the villains do now, and most of the coppers in cars do. So now nobody really knows who's armed, and so they shoot first and ask questions later, unfortunately. So I would not like to be a copper on the beat in the UK at the moment. It's a bad position to be in. But they're still using the community policing model, which I think works, having done it. So
it absolutely works.
I mean, how can the sheriffs get to that point?
Well, I think in many areas the sheriffs are doing a pretty good job with community policing and have been for a long time.
I live in Santa Clarita. They're very good up there.
Yeah. I don't think it's an issue of the sheriff's department not doing it. I think it's an issue of every organization in America reevaluating where we are relative to community policing. I look back in the 90s, there was a big push for community policing in Los Angeles, having come out of the civil unrest period in 1992. There was a big push and a necessary one to re-engage with the community and to build bridges. And the Clinton crime bill of 1994, which tried to provide money to add an additional 100,000 officers, community policing officers throughout the nation, was a great effort, and many cities benefited greatly from that. And there was a focus on doing community policing work and re-engaging with the community. And what happened was we were working on that through the 90s, and then September 11th came.
Yeah.
And the focus was, federal focus was readjusted for obvious reasons from community policing to counterterrorism through intelligence-led policing. And the focus became much more technology-oriented, where policing, to be fair, had a new overlay now for counterterrorism that we didn't have previously, or certainly not to that level. And I think there's a need, certainly, for where we evolved into, but there's a need to reevaluate and to have a hybrid model where, even dealing with counterterrorism issues, there's no better partner than the community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a Japan model. They have the kiosks in the neighborhoods, and the Japanese officers will go to the kiosk, and the community will come there, and they'll talk and exchange information. They know who's in their area. The cop walking the footbeat in London knows who belongs.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if terrorists get 85% of their information publicly, that means they're out and about. And if we can watch and look and observe and report, I think that's really, really important. And, community policing to me back in the 80s was, I wrote my tickets, and it's not much going on swing shift. I'm going to get out and walk around in downtown Culver City and just talk to the shop owners and see what's going on and stuff. And I think one of the problems is, like you talked about earlier, is going call to call to call to call.
Right.
How do you get the time for that? And in California, the West Coast model, we don't have 20,000 cops standing on corners like New York.
Right, exactly.
And it's hard to get that done.
Yeah, we don't have the opportunity like some jurisdictions, particularly back east, have the officer walking the beat, where they get to know the community get to know them, view them as very approachable. That's a more difficult challenge here, where officers are in a car because we're a mobile society, running from call to call, and particularly on busy nights, they're mandated to go from call to call, and everybody who calls 911 wants the police there as quickly as they can get them there. So there's a demand for superior response time, and with that drives the desire to get to the call quickly, but you have to leave the call just as quickly to get to the next call and the next call and on down the road. And every time you get back in the car and the computer in the car is telling you what the call load is and you're driven, there's 5 waiting for you potentially.
Right.
So you look at that, but I think what we can do is, it's a philosophy, not just the actual practice. It's how we think about each call we do have and how we interact with the public and look at every interaction an opportunity for a positive exchange, and to be able to share as much information as we can in a short, condensed period of time time, so that we leave the person feeling like there was some value added by having the police respond to their call. And then to allow for a follow-up, if it's appropriate, to be able to help them with whatever their issue is. Because one of the tenets of community policing is not just dealing with the symptom, but dealing with the underlying problem. And problem solving is a critical aspect. Community partnerships a critical aspect. And bringing those two together is how we make communities better and safer. And I think getting back, and that's a mindset more than it is just the practice, and taking advantage of when we do have downtime to revisit those spots that we've been to previously when we didn't have enough time, and to be able to deal with the underlying problems.
What do you think about your LAPD lead program? I find that effective in the jurisdictions I worked in, running guard companies, where I could call Justin from West Hollywood, Officer Justin, and you know what? If I had something that needed just a little more looking at or a push or something, and he'd call me back, and I felt satisfied. And he's not walking footbeat. He's just a reallocated source that was helpful. That's the minimum level of community policing, I think.
Well,
but it's very effective. It's a big return on the investment. For just having a guy you can say, hey, what's going on? How do I navigate this?
They're kind of the quarterback for their piece of real estate, if you will. And oftentimes in departments, they're not driven by radio calls where they're out there just running from call to call. But their job is problem solving, is to work with other city or county agencies, community-based organizations that have also a responsibility for helping address that issue, and being the bridge between the police and the other agencies that can weigh in on these issues, to bring their resources to bear on a problem, to work with the community to be able to identify what are the needs of the community, what are the priorities of the community, and how do we best address those. In LAPD, they call it the Senior Lead Officer Program. That goes back to 1969. In Long Beach, we instituted the Patrol Resource Officer, and different names, but the job is the same, is to be able to have that 30,000-foot view and to be able to do non-traditional things that make the community safer and improve the quality of life for everybody as well.
A few weeks ago, we was talking to the chief of Riverside.
Right.
And what's his name?
Sergio Diaz.
Sergio Diaz, not the golfer. Not the golfer, Sergio Garcia.
A big part of the discussion was the issue of early parolees and
problem.
I mean, what's your view on that? Because it seems to be a huge issue that I didn't really realize was there. And
it was Assembly Bill 109. We call it AB 109, but it's realignment. And what it did was, effective October 1st, 2011, it realigned the responsibility of state government to county government and local government for the care and protection, I guess, if you will, and incarceration of inmates. It was driven by both budget, but also a Supreme Court mandate that said you shall lower the amount of people in the state prison system by 45,000 inmates. And with that, then, that's statewide, but about a third to 40% of that population comes back to Los Angeles County.
Wow.
Yeah. So the L.A. County area takes an inordinate, hit, if you will, when things are decentralized and the responsibility comes back to the county jurisdiction. And we're hopeful that as we continue to move forward, that we'll be able to make our case to get additional allocation of resources to be able to help meet that challenge that we faced. What we have done in L.A. County is we've taken the money we have gotten from the state, which is divvied up through the L.A. County Police Chiefs Association. LAPD got a portion, L.A. Sheriff's Department got a portion, and then the rest of it we divvied up among regions within the county, so that the 45 independent city chiefs also had an opportunity to be able to put in place compliance teams regionally, so that we could find out where the AB 109 individuals are living, because about 40% of the addresses we had for those folks coming back were not good addresses.
Wow.
So our goal was to find them and then be able to visit them, offer them whatever help and services we could, but let them know that we're watching them as well. And as best we can, try and set them up for success, but let them know that the other side of that is if they're back out reoffending, we're going to be watching for them.
So just so we're clear, because we got into this with the former chief, if you're the sheriff, you have the authority and ability to release. In fact, you're mandated kind of to keep your numbers down.
Right.
But you're not releasing sexually violent predators. You're not releasing, murderers and things. It's really kind of lowering the classification of some minor felonies back to misdemeanors, and we're not releasing killers out there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All
but
right.
it's a triage system, and it's very challenging, and I think it's painted in a way that seems simplistic, that this is basic stuff, and it's not. It's very complex. When you look at one of the issues that realignment brought up were people who were incarcerated for lesser offenses. But that what they looked at were the offenses they were currently incarcerated for, not what necessarily their historical criminal record was for. So we need to put in place a very solid and standardized risk assessment tool so that we can look at people, look at their past, and to be able to try as best we can to judge what their future is going to be like. So we minimize risk when we release somebody, minimize their risk to the community.
How does it kind of work? I mean, if you're the sheriff, you get a list. Okay, we got 10 people we can release. I mean, who decides it's those 5? How does it? Is it a committee?
Yeah.
I mean, how's it go?
No, not a formal committee. I mean, there's people in place within the system that see that every day, and they look and they make their best calls as they can. But when you look as well at the system we have set up, we have a system for pretrial people who are incarcerated pretrial. What determines who gets out and who stays in? And if there's a bail set, it's often those that can make the bail, who can afford to make the bail, and those that can't stay in.
And some don't go in because they handle it at that level. Okay, you got convicted for 2 years, but it's full, so you're on parole or something.
Well,
too simple?
Yeah, that's too simple.
Okay,
yeah.
all right, good. I'm a simpleton.
But I think trying to, as best we can, put mechanisms and systems in place so that we evaluate the risk based on past indicators that we have to be able to, if we're going to release somebody, to release those that are least likely to reoffend.
I don't know if you noticed it, but how many prisoners are actually in jails at the moment?
In LA County Jail?
LA County.
Yeah, it went from a low probably a year and a half ago of about 15,500 to 16,000. Max capacity is about 22,000, and we're up in the area now, I understand, of 19,500 or so. So there is challenges. And when I look at that, and you look at the issue of how much it costs to incarcerate, what's the right thing, how do we decide who to release, 15 to 20% of the people in LA County Jail are there because they're mentally ill.
Yeah,
and there's nowhere else to be
still,
able to.
I mean, that was a problem in the 80s. It's
still a problem. It's because it's the default mechanism to deal with that issue.
Yeah.
And we're treating, in some cases, illness as if it's a crime.
Yeah.
And it doesn't make any sense at all to continue to do that. And so I think as sheriff, you have a bully pulpit to be able to try and advocate for community-based mental health clinics, community-based mental health courts, so that there's a potential for diversion rather than just incarceration for people who are dealing with a sickness.
Yeah.
How many beds are there, jail beds total in all of LA County? Not just the sheriff's department, but if you put all the PDs together, there's quite a few, right?
Yeah, the difference is the police departments have a pre-arraignment jail setup. So it's once you're filed on for a case, then you go to county jail.
Well, we used to have people pay to stay in Culver City.
Yeah, there is special arrangements like that in a number of different departments
Yeah.
throughout the county, but generally short-term, weekend for a DUI case or something along those lines.
So we can actually vote to go to a specific...
Oh, you can. I mean,
I didn't know that.
if you were drunk driving and you had some dough, you paid so much a night to stay at Culver City Jail instead of county.
Interesting.
But I was wondering, if instead of releasing people, if we just used 10,000 more jail cells that are available and made arrangements to say, okay, we're going to stick you in Culver City for 6 months or a year. I don't know. I mean, it seems I'm encouraged to hear that we were down to 16,000 and now it's not overflowed again. It seems like the system's working for that reason. I'm not in favor for other reasons, but it seems like it's being efficient.
I think there's a lot of people working very hard to try and make a very tough and very complex system work as well as it can. But you look at the condition of Men's Central Jail, and I don't think there's anybody who's ever been in there that wouldn't tell you it needs to be knocked down and we need a new facility, and that's not cheap. There were recent estimates that were over $2 billion to build a new state-of-the-art facility. And we're going to have to move forward with that because our options otherwise are really none.
And what do you do about the gang problems in those jails?
Yeah, that's
pretty bad.
The big one.
Yeah, I mean that's something that is a constant challenge because you're charged with protecting those that are incarcerated. Not only charged with protecting the people on the street from the people that are incarcerated, but within the incarceration, within the jail system, protecting inmates from each other, and that is a challenge, particularly when you have the gang rivalries and you can't put this set with that set, and you've got to know who lines up with who, and so there's an intelligence function that goes behind all of this that actually saves lives.
If I don't know, it's not a good choice, but if Arizona has 1,000 empty beds, why can't we stick some LA County guys that are overflowing in Arizona and pay them some rent?
In the tents, isn't it?
Well, the tents
there,
actually. I mean, that's not the best stuff. Well, there's empty beds in other jurisdictions because there's not as much crime, right?
Yeah.
Why can't we contract with another state to say take some of these overflows and Is it just some kind of
Well,
jurisprudence issue or what?
Yeah, no, the state has the opportunity to do that, and they have done that in the past. I think the political will was not there to keep doing it that way, but rather to try and deal with it within the state by other alternative mechanisms to incarceration, and other things looked at are the ankle bracelet, the GPS, the monitoring by other means, and trying to do, I think, as good a job that way as they could. But that was done, and is still always, I guess, an option. But I'm not sure the political will is there to do that right now.
Would you, I don't know, petition's not the right word. Would you champion trying to build new jails and try to get people to do it and raise funds and so?
Well, certainly a replacement for Men's Central Jail. I don't see an appetite for building additional jails in the county or in the state. I believe that people want to look for, because the cost is prohibitive.
Yeah.
I think people want to look, and I think it's a smart way to do business, look for opportunities to be able to find innovative ways of monitoring and tracking people other than incarceration where it makes sense for the community, and that person won't be a hazard to the community physically by letting them out.
What do you think about private industry taking over?
Yeah, there's the
jails?
Geo Group. They do private jail stuff.
Yeah, that's done at various locations around the country, and it's something that I know has been looked at over and over again. At the state level, that's maybe something that they're considering. I'm not sure. When you deal with that, you're also dealing with union issues. You're dealing with it's a very complex stew that you're getting involved with in that one. There's all sorts of innovative ideas out there for moving forward that dealing with our own employees within our own organizations to do it a little differently, change deployment, look at the way we physically set up the facilities so that maybe fewer deputies or fewer custody assistants can monitor more inmates and do it in a way that's safe for the inmates, safe for the deputies, using technology or using other means, and as simple as the pod system versus the jail tier system, where your visibility is very limited without walking down the tiers in the current Men's Central Jail, where in Twin Towers you're in a pod configuration, and somebody in the control room has the ability to be able to see a number of different pods, and one person can supervise a much bigger area. So,
going back to the jurisdictional setup, the sheriff's department tends to be in areas that are not the nicest. Right, Santa Cruz is nice, although I hate the traffic. But Lenox, why is that the wrong impression that they tend to get the not so nice areas of the county?
Yeah,
they're not getting Encino, right? I mean,
Well, that's in the city of Los Angeles.
No, I know, but it's an example. They're not really getting nice areas. They're getting kind of really crime problem areas. And I always wondered if we could prevent more crime, technically meaning prevent an arrest because he's not doing it, then our jail population is going to go down. Because right now, cops are really good at catching you doing something.
Right.
If you increased, LAPD by 9,000 officers and doubled them, do you think crime would go down? Or the sheriffs, we doubled it?
Oh, I think absolutely. I think that you would be able to police more effectively if officers are hired the right people, well trained, well supervised, and well led. I think that each additional officer provides you an additional increment of safety. However, I think the cost of that is probably prohibitive to be able to do what you just talked about, is doubling it. When you look at the budgets now of police or public safety as a percentage of the general fund budget, it's pretty high. And so looking at where do we go from there and how do we best do it, and I think it's by working together collaboratively, by working with the community.
So we got about 3 minutes left. My question is, why are you going to be the next sheriff?
I was just going to say that.
Right? Why are you going to be the best sheriff? I think you are, but let's tell us.
Well, I think, in looking at comparing myself with the other candidates, we've got some good people who've dedicated their whole careers to public safety as well. But I believe I bring an outside perspective, and I think at this time in the LA County Sheriff's Department, that's something that will be very helpful. I sat for a year on the Citizens Commission on Jail Violence, examining the issues in the jail and as they permeated throughout the organization as well, and spent a year during LASD's darkest days, and a lot of lessons learned in that I would not have anticipated prior. I've also been in two organizations, LAPD and Long Beach PD, that have been through a transformative process, which is what the LA County Sheriff's Department needs right now. And of the other candidates, I'm the only one that's run a police department. So I believe that is a tremendous asset as well.
That's an excellent point,
Yeah.
right? Because the other people running have just been administrators inside them.
Right.
That's interesting.
And then in 2 departments, I've also set up command accountability systems where we set goals, we set milestones, and we hold people accountable for performance and behavior to be able to achieve those goals. And I think that's a critical aspect, too, that any business person would understand. And then I have a career-long track record of working with the community. And I think that's something that we desperately need to do moving forward. So all in all, I just feel like the right guy at the right time, and I'm hopeful the voters on June 3rd will see it that way as well.
I agree.
Chief, or dare I say Sheriff McDonnell, thanks for coming in.
Thank
We're
you for
running a
having
little
me.
short. Tune in next week on Security Guy Radio. Visit us on the web at YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Thanks for listening to Security Guy Radio. That's securityguyradio.com.
Cheers.